Okay. Um, we're going to wrap up with not this order, but this one. And I think the final thing that we were looking at was the area base price total. And did everyone see the spreadsheet that I copied you on Friday?
I saw the spreadsheet, but I didn't get a chance to take a look at it, so I will tonight, though.
Dagmar, did you have any? We'll look at it real quick. And there was one issue that I initially was incorrect on in terms of the area-based price, but it was easy to resolve, and I think it may clear up a couple of things. Dagmar, did you have any questions with it?
No, there were two things that drove me crazy, but that was my own stupidity, and I finally worked it out.
Which ones were they?
Oh, it was just I had the perimeter wrong. I kept on thinking each home was 12 instead of 10 linear feet. And that's what threw me off. I'm like, why the heck? And once it dawned on me, I was doing the math wrong, and it's not 12 linear feet, but 10. That took care of it on magnetic strips and cutting.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, I kept on multiplying 2 by 3 instead of adding them together.
The thing that threw me off when we were working it, or I'm not sure if we were all on the call at this point, if it was just me and Linda, was that we kept being off by like $2.32 or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that, and it was actually the 10%.
It was. So the thing to remember with the multiplier in area-based pricing, the 10, 20, or 30, it is only applied to the print area of this substrate and nothing else.
So not the scrap?
Not the scrap.
So it would be, in this case, 24?
Yeah, yes. The print area 24 times the print area price of this stuff. So it was $9.30 a square foot.
Okay.
$2.32. There's our 10% right there at $22.32.
Okay. Okay.
And really that's about it with this. Another thing just to keep an eye on is on finishing items. They're always going to, or potentially can include a setup time, a per piece time. This is one thing that didn't really throw me off, but it made me have to go back and look at it a couple of times. I think we saw it with grommets. No, I saw it with drill holes.
And the per piece and per finishing, which I had to think about too.
Yeah, the wording here is not great. The per piece charge is for the total quantity on the order, which there was a quantity of 4. So it's a $2 setup charge, 4 images, so that's another $2, and then there were 16 drill holes. So that gave us $8, 50 times 16. So 8, 2, and 2 gave us the $12. And that wraps that up. Any other thoughts or questions that we want to look at on here before going to the next product? It's gonna.
Only quick question with iCut, for instance. We're just assuming one pass or one cut is one per sign. Is that how it just kind of?
You're correct. However, that can be determined by the substrate, right? Because any
as far as thickness is concerned, yeah.
You can set a substrate cutting to 2 passes right here, in which it would double that calculation. Now, one other thing that we should be aware of, one, because it's kind of neat, and 2, because it finally works after a very long time of getting it to work, is cut styles. we'll just briefly look at this, and then you can play around with it to see what it's doing.
Peter, real quick, the cut styles, is that only for cost base?
Yes, Linda, it is. So that's one thing to know right there, is that this only affects cost-based pricing.
So if you had a client that wanted to do some bevel cut or something like that,
yeah,
but is area-based and they would have an upcharge with that, how would you handle that?
It would really be fairly simple. These properties that exist here, or we could add, for example, insert a column, say, or use the price field because the price field isn't used. So we could say, it doesn't matter what number we put here, we can use it any way we want to based on whatever formula we use. So we could tell them, I don't know, there is no standard way of defining this, but we could say, all right, if you're area-based pricing and you want to charge for acrylic edges, how much do you want to charge per either foot or per piece or whatever? Insert a price here and then write a little line of code, tack that code onto the end of the area-based finishing variable, and that would be one simple way to do it. But in these scenarios, this is something where I would ask the customer, how do you want to deal with it? How do you want to charge for it? And let them kind of point you in the direction that's going to make them happy. If they're happy with a per unit price, that's real simple. If it were a per foot price, it would still be relatively simple. Formula would just have to figure out the perimeter and multiply it by this. And really, you could use the current area-based cutting formula, which is a perimeter times a dollar amount per foot per pass, and you could follow the same kind of thing here. Now the neat thing about cut style is that a lot of times you'll get customers who will say they do kiss cutting or some other type of slice or something like that. And with the thought of OOB and keeping things simple, yes, you could create a modifier to pull in a completely different machine or the same machine with completely different settings or whatever, or you could offer them this. When you have to do slicing or kiss cutting, how much does that add to the cut time? And so we could insert anything here that we want, and the additional pass we would say assign here, so it would then calculate another run across the perimeter of the images and affect the speed of the original cut either up or down. So if we just said 1 at 100%, it would basically double the cutting value minus any setup. If we said, well, it takes twice as long to kiss cut, then the percent of change would be 50%. Or, it takes, we do it twice as fast, then, 200% increase. And they can experiment with that. That doesn't add any parts or anything to the system, but it does affect the cost calculation in that it affects the cut time and then the cut labor. I just wanted to point that out. We've had it for a long time, and it was only recently that we addressed making it work, because initially it just really didn't do anything except show up on the work order. But now there is functionality to this list, and I have found it useful a number of occasions.
Okay.
All right. Now we're going to go to a brand new order, and we're going to look at cut vinyl. I think the most common cut vinyl application other than RTA is cut vinyl on flat stock, so we'll start with that. Dagmar, did y'all do a lot of cut vinyl at
Yeah, we still did, you know, longer longevity or cheaper than having to color match something that's printed and laminated. And often, you know, those vinyls would last longer than what we would do on laminated printed one.
Yeah, I've heard that, and people still are doing cut vinyl, some more than others, and it's still used a lot in electrical signs and other applications. So we're going to say let's just do a board 48 by 96, and our text is going to be Eat at Joe's, maybe a few lines and then a phone number. Now, here's where kind of my issue with cut vinyl comes up, and I think a lot of other people's too, even though I understand why it's done the way it is. On the material side of things, if we select Coroplast, let's say acrylic. The sheet consumption here on material is identical to digital printing. Cutting here is going to work a little bit different. We'll talk about that. But the process by which we put information on that sign in cut vinyl is very different. In this case, no printer is selected. It is a plotter, and I think we've all seen plotters by now. And the complexity affects things a little bit differently too. In this case, complexity doesn't generate a perimeter multiplier or anything like that, because perimeter cutting is not what is going on with cut vinyl. With cut vinyl, we calculate cutting on a square foot basis by complexity. In this case, this plotter is simple, 240 square feet, 180, and 90 depending on that scale. And along with the cutting, we're also calculating a weed labor here, which is also set up according to complexity. So we're just saying here 60 square feet per hour in simple through 25 square feet per complex, and these are some of the examples of what would be simple or complex. Now, Dagmar, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions with this product because hands-on, I've had limited experience with it. Does the complexity diagrams here do you find that these apply to real life scenarios in terms of a significant difference in weeding and cutting or production of, say, a solid image like this with a star cut out versus individual letters and numbers versus a layered type thing like this?
The first two, yes. Definitely, and the third one on any single color that's complicated. I'm not sure if that whole cut time and weeding for what I'm seeing as basically 3 layers of vinyl.
Yeah.
On the complex one, whether that really would be, true or not.
Is it because it could vary greatly in actuality?
Well, if you did that just out of one color, that's a whole different thing. But if you are layering 3 different colors, and if that complexity is supposed to reflect that for all 3 layers, I don't know, because any one layer could be that complex. In this case, you've got yellow and black being really complex. The blue is no big deal.
Right.
So that's the part I'm having issues with it being multicolored. If that were just black and white, I'd say, yeah, that might be true. But if you're having to do it with 2 layers,
maybe our image example isn't really appropriate here.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, the yellow isn't too complicated either because it's just going to be the background of the black. So it's a little more simple, but you've got basically 3 different complexities within that picture. You've got the easy blue, and then you've got the yellow, which is more complex, but the black is the one that's really complex. So, yeah, it might just be the example I'm hung up on.
Well, in the way that I saw this, I really saw the black as a solid background and the yellow on top of the black, so that you had the black outline.
Yeah, could be either one, yeah.
But either way, I think the point here is, in an OOB and even in a customizable type scenario, I don't know, without the exception of manual input, how you could calculate this any other way. I just don't know. So this is what it does. This is how it works. And so in the vinyl consumption, this is really where I kind of have to step back a little bit and think about it, is we're used to seeing in digital printing where the image width is important because it determines how many individual prints or images we're going to get on that material and what the layout's going to be. Well, that doesn't exist in cut vinyl, and it doesn't exist for a number of reasons. I think one was we wanted a way for customers to easily be able to input a lot of vinyls without having to specify name brand, width, and color. So you basically have an intermediate colors versus an intermediate black and white, and they're all linked to a colors list, but we don't have a part linked that's every individual color. And the other is that you would need to have multiple layout functions on this for each color of vinyl, which would also make it somewhat ugly to work with. And so the solution is that while the consumption of everything on a roll in Sirius is based on a linear foot, that is not true anymore when we're working with cut vinyls. Now we're working with a percentage of fill. Specifically what this means is if we have 48 by 96, that gives us a potential area of 32 square feet to work with or to work on. And if my percentage of fill, actually, sorry, I was thinking about that complex image and we have this text here. If my percentage of fill, let's say, Eat at Joe's, the sign is 48 high, 96 wide. Eat at Joe's, let's say, might be centered like this. Might have a separator and then phone number, maybe address, and some other information. Dagmar, help me with this if I'm totally off track. This is the way I see it. So just one second, because Jim is. Let me answer Jim real quick. We're just working on an issue. So, and let's say Eat at Joe's takes up a good third of the sign, and then some sort of separator line, and then the address. My thoughts here was, all right, the back of the sign, let's say, is black, but it's white Coro. So we would say 100% fill on the back. Eat at Joe's is in yellow, and this is where it's always been kind of complicated to me and somewhat subjective. If Eat at Joe's takes about a third of the screen, you know, we could say, to be safe, then that would be about, and I guess we really don't have to be this exact with it, but let's say about 35% of the screen. And then the rest, the address, we'd say comes up about halfway, and that would be in blue. Dagmar, is that the way that you see this?
Yeah, I get kind of how this is set up. Just it's very foreign to me. So yeah, we had it working very differently. So I get where you're going with this.
Okay.
Or how it's supposed to be entered.
So my issue here has always been that there's really no way around this, but this opens up a great deal of subjectivity on the estimating side, and you really will have to have someone with some sort of vinyl experience to determine what these numbers are. Now, having said that, if this is a 48 by 96 and you're covering up to a third with the Eat at Joe's in yellow, the system doesn't know whether you're doing that on a 15-inch roll or a 24-inch roll, etc. And so there's no real way for it to know how much is being scrapped. Therefore, the consumption of cut vinyl is by square foot, regardless of what roll it's on, what the width of it is, etc. Now, built into every cut vinyl part, one second please, Linda, Jim was able to get on his system for that for Brad. So
awesome. Thank you for pushing that through.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, no, I'm glad he was able to contact him on Skype apparently. Okay, in every cut vinyl part in the system, by default, I think it's the only parts like this. They have a next quarter square foot rounding plus 15% scrap factor built in to every part. So what you see here when we look at the part consumption is where the 32 square foot usage was coming in. It calculates 37 square foot, then 13 square feet for the third, and another 18.5 square feet for the 50% usage. So this number here, much the same way as ink coverage, this number here is always a percent of the area being covered by with cut vinyl, no matter what the overall image height and width is.
Peter, can you explain the scrap again? How does that work?
There really is no scrap consumption in this product, with the exception of the fact that parts have a built-in 15% scrap factor, and that it's rounding up to the next quarter square foot. So if you cross over a quarter of a foot of cut vinyl, it's going to round up to the next quarter square foot,
Okay.
which is scrap plus 15 additional percent on top of that. And the thinking
is that an automatic factor that's built into the data set by default,
Yeah.
or is that something that they can change in the API?
No, in the API they can't change it, but they could change it on the parts tab. But yes, Rob set that up on all cut vinyl parts.
So which parts tab would they change that on? They'd have to go into the part and go to the consumption tab and do it there?
Exactly, where the inventory units
Where
are.
we don't really train them to do that. So that would be something that as you're working with a client, you would then determine if they let me just go back up a minute. Do
Yep.
we tell them that there's a 15% scrap value there anywhere, or is it just an assumed system setup number that we don't even discuss?
No, I normally do let them know, because if you're looking at if you're looking at this job, and we have pre-mask on here, you see that application pre-mask, well, assuming one color at 100% is going to be 32 square feet of coverage. And by contrast, they look at the vinyl and they'll ask, well, why is it 37%? And then that's when I tell them, well, because in cut vinyl, all cut vinyl parts have a 15% scrap factor built into them. But this is true of any part. Any user, certainly maybe not a brand new user, but any user can change their scrap factor and or their rounding, and many of them do. For example, if you have a customer that has a lot of CSR people who are placing orders, and they want to consistently or don't run the risk of overcharging based on a full sheet usage of material, there are many customers out there that will default this, maybe not so much on cut vinyl, but certainly on printed, might default this to print area only. Mm-hmm. They're very smart to do, if they do this, to bump that scrap up to 10% on all flat stocks to make sure that they're accounting for scrap, because this setting accounts for no scrap. Other than that, that works exactly like it does in print vinyl. So I think, let me go ahead and add the cutting here, because two things that we need to be aware of in cutting. The cutting here is calculated very differently, as we spoke about, than perimeter cut on digital vinyl. So the cut rates here are based on 32 square feet divided by sorry, we can see it right here. In the case of simple, or in the case of standard, that cut speed is 32 divided by 180 square feet per hour plus any additional setup time. The weeding labor is divided at is figured out at 32 divided by 45 square feet an hour. Now, let's look at this plotter. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry. The cut method down here, this is for plotting the vinyl, and this cut method is for cutting the substrate. So we very likely would have a perimeter cut down here, where up here it's the cut vinyl. Now, a couple of things that you'll be asked about that may fool you, that you'll wonder why it's doing this, is if we look at this GraphTech machine, what we're going to do is remove the one time, the per color, and the per piece. The per piece setup, I'll make this comment about it in the 2 minutes per piece. If you're working with a Speed Pro or some other digital vinyl shop and they're doing, say, 500, 1,000, 1,500 bumper stickers out of cut vinyl or any sort of decal, this 2 minutes per piece will absolutely kill them, because it's 2 minutes times 500 or 1,000 or 1,500. I almost always tell customers to keep an eye on that number. If they're doing large number of jobs, remove it altogether or keep it at something very low. Since small orders of 3 or 4, 20 cents is nothing. But on large orders, if you're not aware of this number, you can kill your pricing before you even submit the estimate. It's going to be just way too high. So for this example, I just want to zero it out so that we're just left with the numbers here. Many customers are going to struggle with cut vinyl. Surprisingly enough, there's really very few of them that take issue with the square foot consumption. That being the case, I think that Rob probably knew something that, or was aware of customers' feelings that I don't get even to this day, because again, the overwhelming majority of people have no complaints with this. I don't know if vinyl's cheap. I don't know what the deal is, but
It is.
okay.
It really is.
The other issue is there have been a few that have been real sticklers over this, which is one of the reasons for plotted prints, and I think some customers have even paid to have it customized to do a linear calculation. But they'll struggle with a couple of other things that Linda, I don't know, recently working with Vinyl Graphics, the company, I don't know if this is something that we may need to rethink in the OOB. Cloning this line item, I'm going to make this a little easier by getting rid of these additional colors. We said that our cut time is 180 square feet divided by, 32 by 180, and weeding is 45. If we look at our cut speed, it's at 18.18 hours, 32 by 180, 0.18 hours. And we looked at our weed speed, and it is 45. Now, 32 divided by 45 is 0.71 hours. But if you look here, it's 53.4 minutes. So almost a full hour. The reason this is occurring is because this setting is a cut and weed setting. So it is combining cutting and weeding into one variable. What you're seeing here is the machine time, and what you're seeing here is really a combination of vinyl weed time, which is in fact vinyl weed time all right. So vinyl weed time is really 42 minutes, and add the 10 minutes or so of cutting time, and you have the 53 minutes. this gives customers a lot of problems sometimes. And if we look at the product, it's really very simple to say vinyl tape and apply, vinyl weeding labor, is based on these two variables, vinyl weed time and vinyl plotter time. If we add cut labor to this product and set the consumption to vinyl plotter time, then because they have solid numbers that they can look at and compare to the settings on those machines, it just makes a lot more sense to them. So this, in this case, breaks it out by weed time of 43 minutes and cut labor of 1080, which is the 18 that we see up here. I only mention that in terms of a data set adjustment because it's very simple to do, and while you're always wanting the customer to integrate the numbers with what they're seeing on the screen and make the divisions, do the divisions in their head, or at least understand what's going on there, when they see something like vinyl weed time, it just brings them to an absolute halt if they pay that much attention to it. Some will, some won't.
That makes sense to me to do that.
And so, I mean, it's just an idea, and it's very simple. Now, for a 40.
Peter, can you put a ticket in for that?
I will.
Just as a suggestion.
I will.
Thank you.
So a 48 by 96. I'm sorry, Dagmar, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that made sense to me too, that you split it up like that.
It just, I don't do it out of the box, but if a customer is struggling with it, I'll just do it real quick and it's done. Now, the last part of vinyl, after they've plotted and applied it, it would be cutting. And in this case, we're really talking about, let's say that these were really 18 by 36 and there were four of them. At this point, we're talking about cutting, 18 by 36. At this point, we're talking about cutting the 4 out of acrylic, which would work exactly. The cutting there is exactly like cut labor. The perimeter of the 4 18 by 36s divided by whatever the cut speed is for standard, including the perimeter multiplier for acrylic. In finishing, the only finishing we have here is flat stock finishing. Everything calculated here is identical to digital prints. And in terms of layout data, you're only, I'm not sure why this is defaulted here. In terms of layout, there must be a user constant to set this, I think. In terms,
Yeah, there is.
okay.
There is one.
In terms of layout data, the only thing the customer is getting is how many images can come from the 48 by 96. Nothing of the cut vinyl placement on the 18 by 36 is accounted for in layout. Is that are we clear on that? Dagmar, would that have created a big problem for you?
Well, we handle this whole thing completely differently.
I'm curious.
Well, and I don't know, Brian had kind of a special product too. We did have multiple lines of color. I can't quite remember what we did for the consumption of each individual color, but we didn't use fill percentage at all. So we would typically select the width of the material. because that's probably the biggest issue. If you have it in stock, you know what size you have it in, and most likely you'll just panel if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's something you don't stock, you're going to want to get the right color, and you also want to know how much you need to purchase by the yard, because you're not going to stock 50 different width and lengths of colors. So you're just buying it by the yard.
Well,
And
I think,
that was
truthfully,
the biggest pain for us.
I think that the reason that most people are okay with this setup, and it really is the overwhelming majority, is because they're trading off one inconvenience for another. And I think because of the case of vinyl, of it being cheap, with the exception maybe of the specialty, the reflective ones and stuff like that,
Yeah.
is that the money is being made primarily on the substrate, and I think when we look at RTA, that's going to be made more evident, and so that's cut vinyl. We're going to look at RTA as well, ready to apply.
So Peter, are you saying that typically shops would not stock any of these vinyls, and when they place the order, they would then just order specifically a 15-inch if they needed it, or whatever?
No,
at that time?
No. Even though some of that occurs, what you'll see is some shops will have a wall that's nothing but a rack of cut vinyls of different colors, lengths, widths, etc. And nobody wants to deal with that in terms of having to have each one of those parts in the system. I've often wondered what people do for inventory in those cases. If it's
that was going to be my next question. How do they do that? Or have you seen people inventory this?
I've always gave them the line that it is what it is, and if they want to track inventory for it, they're going to have to input every part in the system by color, brand, width, and everything else. And even still, that consumption on that part is going to be a general consumption and really not to the specific foot. So there's going to be a perpetual type of adjustment that is going to occur with cut vinyl parts. I just don't know.
Could they just kind of putting on more of an auditor hat?
Mm-hmm.
Could they just have this HP 3M Scotch 15 inch, and they may have it in 4 or 5 colors, and they just take a quantity count of how much in total they have for those colors, and that's what they have as an inventory value. So it's really just a sum of the multiple colors.
What I have seen, that's correct. And what I have generally seen in practice is in cut vinyls, where the high performance and intermediates are, they will have either whatever their preferred brand is, Avery, Oracal, 3M, whatever, and they'll have an Avery color and an Avery black and white. In terms of, they'll ask, well, the costs are different for 15-inch versus 20-inch rolls. And I will ask them, well, do you know which roll production is grabbing to do the job? Sometimes in a small shop, yes. Most times, no. I'll always tell them, well, take an average or use the 20-inch roll or the more expensive roll price. We're not talking large amounts of money here. It's pennies. And that does differ. That can differ when you're talking about something like $2.45 a square foot as opposed to 50 cents a square foot. But for the most part, that works. Some people also, consider cut vinyl as dying out. I particularly don't think of it that way, because I see its purpose and where it's very useful.
There are things that you can't create in any other way at this point.
That's right. That's right. And
reflective vinyls.
Exactly.
Or metallic vinyls or neon.
Exterior signage, electric, for example, anything that's exposed to rain that you're going to pay for to last is going to be in cut vinyl because it looks better and it's going to last longer. So in terms of my problem with cut vinyl has been really what we as implementers have a problem with, and not so much customers, and that's the truth. To me, this is kind of backwards and kind of nutty, but customers don't complain about it, and people smarter than me, came up with this.
Isn't the other problem more of that subjective number of percent of fill? I mean, one person could say, well,
yeah, but
it's like 20% versus 30%.
I can't tell you. These numbers here, I believe, are also a user constant, and I think they're set like that. I can't tell you how many people, when you're walking through cut vinyl, will proceed to run down these colors, and and they are perfectly fine with 100, 80, 60, 40, 25, and 25, and don't even touch this.
Is it because they don't maybe understand how that's calculating it, and they just look at the total price to see if it's in the ballpark?
I don't really know. I can say that percentage of fill or percentage fill, they pick up on that. They understand that. So I really just think that it translates well for most users. I just don't know. I think when we're talking about intermediate colors, we're probably talking about 100% of the vinyl that I pull off of this roll, whether it's 15 or 20 inches, 24 inches, it's going to be scrapped. Some of it's going to be used and the rest of it's going to be scrapped. There'll be nothing else I can do with this vinyl. So if even they're doubling it by 100%, using 100% fill on each one, different people think about it in different terms. It's just the overall price of it. I think the overall impact that the vinyl has on the price is minimal when you think of the substrates.
Just a quick
Sure.
example of how we dealt with it. We really just had 12 colors in stock, and
okay.
in one width. And those were our bread and butter, everyday, red, yellow, blue, green, black, white, silver, and gold, and 2 colors each of the yellow, blue, red, and green. And most of the time that's all I needed, but there were quite a few where I just have to get by the yard whatever vinyls, and I would just have a part for the series and the width. So I'd have maybe Gerber 220 in 15, 24, 30, and 48, width, and those are the ones that would basically be pulled. We'd enter in the color, but the color didn't have its own part, just like you have here.
That's right.
And I would just need to look at the order and then do the purchase order based on that, and just retype in what the color number was for the vendor. So it's not too big a deal, but it's amazing how much effort it takes for cheap material because there's just so many of them.
I know, and and the application of it is not simple either. But what you say that you're doing is kind of exactly what Rob tried to do here. In that initially these vinyl types this list was not like this. This was broken down by high performance, intermediate, and some the other types. And then when you looked at the selection list for high performance or intermediate, there was a default vinyl part. Now that caused problems with dynamic linking. For some other reasons they changed it, but the thing was that you really priced out the vinyl by the type and had a designated vinyl for that. And the only thing that changed was the color. Now, having said that, each vinyl part has an associated colors list that can be linked to it. So that colors list that comes up with that type of vinyl is set here, and you can of course, do this on the API screen. So if you're setting up a high performance, you would select that color list and do a default color if you want to. These default colors can be edited directly from the product. In area-based pricing, cut vinyl is priced out by the square foot based on complexity or as a percentage of the job, percentage increase on the job. The rigid substrate would be priced out by its cut vinyl pricing, just like it has mounting and digital pricing. Now, real quick, let me just jump over to, let me say this about banners. Banners works identically the same way, except the substrate is roll material, consumed exactly the same way. The layout for it would be exactly if we were printing it. Let's say we were doing 50 of these. You would get this type of breakdown. Vinyl would consume the same way, but there is no layout calculation to the vinyl. And one thing I've never quite understood is why we don't have a cut method for trimming this material like we do in digital printing. Linda, do you know why that doesn't exist?
No, and actually, as you were going through that, that was going to be my next question. Why don't we cut this at all? So I don't really know.
Okay, and it's it's really just the well, there could be some pretty in-depth cutting if we were doing.
Well, would that be under like roll finishing though?
No, it's not. The roll finishing options here are identical to digital. I don't know. This would really be just a trimming.
But could you use that as a finishing to trim it?
You know, it's not necessarily trimming. I mean, when you do a quantity of these, you could be doing it on your Zund cutter router. You know, you wouldn't necessarily just be cutting them, at certain linear increments, because you could be shaping them to some degree too. We had some that would just have a pull pocket at the top and might have a curvature coming to a point at the at the bottom. So you definitely would need a cutting method.
Yeah, right.
Has it ever come up as a question?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So how is it handled now?
Well, fortunately, it doesn't come up a great deal because the product isn't used a great deal. I don't remember, Linda, last time I got the question. Really, there should be some cut calculation here, I think, for just like on digital.
But if it doesn't come up that often, maybe it. I mean, if we don't remember when it came up and it's not that critical of a thing, maybe it doesn't really happen that often.
It doesn't, but I do think it leaves the product. I mean, I think for the customer who does do a lot of this, the implementer. It
would make sense to have it.
Yeah, I think it would be simple to add, but I really don't know why we don't have it here. But anyway.
Could you add that to the ticket on the splitting of the weeding?
I will. I will.
Just have it as a separate line item as the two areas where the suggestion is entered in.
Okay, I will. And again, I just didn't think about it because we really don't see a whole lot of this.
Yeah, it would be easy to add.
Yeah. Now, the finishing here is identical to banner finishing on digital printing. No different. So the only difference between this and digital for both flat stock and roll is the application of the way the vinyl is added. Everything else is the same. So that really, having a grasp on digital, the only thing you need to know about this is how the vinyl works. Now, there is a couple of other scenarios here. There's something called vinyl ready banners. They come pre-packaged, pre-grommeted, pre-finished, and we call them banner blanks, 2 by 10. So we don't even have measurements here for height and width because it's already on the selection list, and we just apply the vinyl as normal. Now here there would truly be no cutting, and there'd be very little grommeting, very little finishing. So I think Rob only has an install method and wind slits, and that's it. Again, this product, I don't think I've reached 5 users who use this.
Yeah, it's pretty uncommon at this point.
Okay, real quick, because I think we can wrap cut vinyl up and then just review it in the form of some questions after this. The other 2 items here are cut vinyl RTA, which just means ready to apply, sold without substrate, and cut vinyl letters ready to apply. Main difference between letters and ready to apply is that this prices out based on letter size and the number of letters. So the calculation here for usage is 6 by 6 inch letters, 1 set of 9 letters, which makes up the 9 letters on this in this text field. This product also is rarely used, and when it is, a lot of times you're going to be asked to set this up on a table base, because people typically will price letters on an upright inch. But if you think about menus or a storefront with hours, a name, and phone numbers, those texts are usually at different sizes, and so you would have in this product 3 or 4 line items of cut letters before you could price out the whole thing. It's rarely used, and when you show people the cut vinyl ready to apply, it becomes the quick favorite because it makes a lot more sense. This one you can think of as like RTA on flat stock without the flat stock. Here, let's say you had a storefront. That area might be 18 by 24, and your text would be whatever, store hours, phone number, open, close, etc. But from within, and then this consumes the material based on the overall height and width, not individual letters. So you might say that you have a 3 inch by 4 inch, no, let's say a 3 inch by 12 inch slot, which is store name, and then directly from this pricing form you can add additional sizes. So the next one might be the phone number, and then the hours, which would take maybe 12 by 14 or whatever, I don't know. And I'm sorry, Dagmar?
I wish I'd had this, because this was always a struggle where we could have put a bunch of things together, ganged them together on the vinyl little pieces, but had to do individual line items. And then look at the overall usage of material and kind of override it on the parts tab. So this is lovely.
The other thing about this one, which is kind of nice, is people who are doing graphics on vehicles will not digital wraps, but cut vinyl, will often clone this and use it as a graphic vehicle product, because within here you could say front door, right door, passenger door, rear, whatever, and whatever that is going to be in the appropriate.
Is that almost like the Quick Quote product, or even easier than that?
Except for this really does pull in material usage. In that,
would it make sense to clone this and name it a vehicle product or not really?
You mean like in the standard OB?
Yeah.
I don't know why it wouldn't. I mean, many people do. I do have it set up that
That's the
way.
first I've ever heard it.
That's the way we set it up in Speed Pro's data set.
Interesting.
So here we add our colors, and we have our pricing. Now, I'm going to say, I'm going to really just expand on the size here to make a point and show you something that's going to come up a lot on this product. In area-based pricing, the pricing is square foot based by complexity. And in cost base, it's just the way it is on the other cut vinyl. But there's another component to the pricing here. And it's not here. And that is because who added transparent aluminum? Was that you, Dagmar?
That was me. That was me.
All right. Okay. And I remember you saying that you used...
I didn't clear those out.
Yeah, but you used the placeholder, right?
I used one of the part holder. Yep, I did.
All right.
So there's
No,
the third one
that's fine. No, the problem was that somehow, and this has been since corrected, but there is another part in cut vinyl RTA that is called something like RTA, and this part that you renamed or cloned, I think you renamed it, was Rob accidentally put it in the second placeholder folder.
Oh. Yeah.
Anyway, that's been corrected, but that's okay. We'll just rename it, and it's called RTA base product. At least that's what it used to be called. I think the name has been changed. This line item, or I'm sorry, this part is hard coded into the RTA product. As you see here, nowhere did I specify transparent aluminum in my bill of materials, but there it is. The purpose of that product, first thing that we'll see is that you were observant, Dagmar, and you changed the units, right?
Yep, I did.
Okay, it was an
So I was
area.
trying to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing you may have noticed is that track cost was turned off, and the reason for it is that this part, any ideas, Linda, I know you know, Travis or Dagmar, why this part is on cut vinyl? And this is the way that it...
So you need a base price and then you have upcharges for different types?
Basically, that's correct, except this is the upcharge. And so
The other way around. Okay.
the way that you'll normally see this part is there is no track cost set, even though if we look at the cost section, you will see a use this price of $171, but this is turned off so that fraction of a penny won't interfere with anything. And in the digital vinyl substrate tab, you will see cut vinyl pricing if we're using this in area-based pricing. The purpose of this part as it stands is really only to resolve the problem that for some people, when they go to sell their cut vinyl, the perceived value of the vinyl is more than that cut vinyl is when you sell it without a substrate. And so this part here, the RTA-based product, only adds whatever, there is no cost, but whatever the square foot value of that part is it just serves as a pure markup on the cut vinyl. You can't really adjust the multipliers down on your cut vinyl, because if you do so, then you'll throw the pricing off on other cut vinyl applications when you're putting it on flat stock or banner. So inevitably, all customers are going to ask you, what is this? And you'll explain it to them that as a result of not having a substrate, your cut vinyl is going to be often too low for your market. The way to bump that price up is by adjusting this I call it a ghost substrate. It works just like flat stock, except it's not really there and doesn't really have any cost. It's just pure markup.
And that comes up pretty often.
It does.
Almost in every case.
And it can. I'm not sure where the $1.71 per square foot came from, but if you see here, with the exception of the high performance vinyl, well, and the labor, it's a significant part of the price of that. So a margin of 78%, if we pull that out of there, would drop our margin and potentially put us, we don't want to, I don't know why anybody would sell something for less than they can. And so for some people that part is going to be important. For those that don't want to use it, you will have to probably show them to go to that part, turn the track cost tab back on so they can access the pricing and zero it out, and then turn track cost back off. If they're really picky and don't want it on their bill of materials at all, that is linked through the flat stock materials substrate on RTA and RTA vinyl cut letters. It's the only variable there, and you see that it's the only part there. So you could just completely remove that and delete the consumption, and they at that point would have nothing to complain about on that particular part. I think most people work. Yes.
Could you handle it the same way with a modifier add-on, but then just hide the modifier from the estimate and invoice?
You could. You absolutely could. And in that way, you could make it a variable value. In other words, you wouldn't have to go back to the part to mark it up, but it would just be like a square foot upcharge. Absolutely.
So you could have it dynamic enough that it would increase based on the quantity and square footage of that order. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And I really don't know much about the value of vinyl. To me, there's not a huge difference in $151 and $180. But I imagine for the business owner that's selling a bunch of this stuff, who's having to keep up a payroll, etc., it is important. So it's just an option for them.
Wouldn't the addition as a modifier make more sense than that RTA-based product?
Truthfully, yes. I believe it would. My feeling on that, though, however, is if we're considering doing that on a data set level, it's really just as easy to do something like what was done here on Reprographics, and allow a square foot override. This is great. All products should really have this. or something like this. I do have some modifiers that I created to both do a square foot override as well as a margin override. So a customer that wants to, clear 75% on everything, they just have to input 75%, and that's where their orders will come out. But of course, that's really only true if their cost is right. So cost is still important.
Right.
So my opinion on that would be, yes, I think it makes more sense, but it makes more sense to do it on the pricing form once and for all as opposed to a modifier.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, any thoughts? Anything way out of whack here that anyone has questions about? It's really, as we saw with the exception of the vinyl part, very similar to digital prints. It's in its own little weird way.
What would you say is the most common question that comes up in this product? Is it adding the colors?
That's a common one. The question about the RTA-based product is another one, which, if we had, let's say, you wouldn't even call it a square foot override, but a RTA markup or something, because of the phenomena that occurs when you lose the substrate and the price goes down. That's another. That itself isn't the question, but another very common one is, what is that? Why do I keep getting this RTA product thing in my pricing? I think the name has now been changed to something else, but it still frequently comes up. In fact, it comes up with everyone who does cut vinyl, and they see that in their parts list. They want to know what that is, what it's for, and how did it get there, and how can they either get rid of it or change the values on it.
So it sounds like adding the square footage override, they would get that 100% more than this kind of workaround to increase a price in the pricing form without affecting the other parts of it.
Yep, and in that case, it's just something that could very easily be mentioned in training. That you can have some flexibility here on your markup, but it would keep them from having to go into parts, reactivating the cost tab, deactivating the cost tab, and or going back to the variable and removing the part from the variable.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that RTA-based product, that was put in years ago.
Very
when
beginning.
we first did the product.
Absolutely.
And now we've since, got a little smarter, and with the Repro product, which is only about a year or so old, we added that in, and this would be an opportunity to remove this base product and use that same functionality that we have in Repro.
Correct. I totally agree.
Okay.
And really, the thought about overriding really goes back as far as architectural signage, where we can do both the square foot or square inch and the margin override.
Wow, that's a great feature to have just about in every product.
Well, I will. I'll send you and Travis and Linda a way to easily do this on a modifier if a customer requests
Why
it.
don't we just add them to all the products?
Well, I totally am in favor of that, without a doubt. But
or put as a user constant that you can turn off or on.
that too would be a possibility.
That would be nice too. That makes more sense to do that.
Yeah, because some customers would want to hide it. That's right.
Put
Honestly,
each of
I
them as
think
a user constant.
We'd have to have a lot of user content.
Yeah, I know. I would do it
The
globally.
maintenance on that. The maintenance on that, every time you add a product, you'd have to add a user constant for it.
Yeah, no, I would do it globally.
So that's what I'm saying, globally, but like for a square inch override or square foot override, whatever the override is on that, and then a margin override, could you do those individually?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Just do each of those as like a size override or a margin override, just to go and say this is, globally affect everything. But somebody might say, okay, like Peter said, I want 75% margin on everything.
Right.
And they could just go ahead and hit the number, at least check it, and then, turn off the override after that to see how close they are. If they're at 72, they already know, but they want to see that $5 or $12 because they don't feel like adding it in their head.
I think real estate on the pricing forms is maybe our biggest constraint on something like this. Like, where do you put it?
Yeah, that's true. Now, in most pricing forms, you do have for an overhead. I mean, right up here we do have the space for something like that. But with the user constant thing, it kind of makes sense because if the customer did not want either to use it, and maybe they can even tie it to the permissions. I don't know. They could, it could be exactly like it was before. As far as a user constant, they can hide it. But if you're getting that request and and we haven't decided whether or not it's going to be added or waiting on that, it's really easy to do with a modifier. But it's even easier to do with a variable on the pricing form.
I'll talk to Rob about that.
Do you want me to throw that in as a suggestion in this ticket, Linda?
Sure.
Okay.
If you're putting that ticket in, that would be great.
Hey, Dagmar, you had a question?
Yeah, so since the user constants are kind of new to me since I only use one for labor, and they're really turning things on or off globally, I used to have some variables that were basically turning on buttons to link to other pricing forms. So I'm just trying to figure out what possibilities, other than the modifiers, that you have to customize it, like on a per product level, on that level.
You don't have much potential in OOB, with the exception of a modifier.
Okay.
And really, if customers are cloning a bunch of products and renaming, it kind of tears up the functionality of these buttons here, which is okay as long as they're aware of it. I think that's one of the main reasons why they can't rename system products unless they clone them first. But it's super easy to do, both in modifiers or ultimately on the product, which makes it easier and looks better. And it's always easier to write formula for variables than it is for modifiers.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, guys, that's all I have. I do have another call I need to get to. So, any other thoughts or questions?
No, I think that that really sums it up. That's really good.
Linda, we'll do a little bit of review on RTA and cut vinyl.
Okay.
But do we want to? The products that stand out to me as very, very, very closely related to cut vinyl digital are the dimensional signs and reprographics as well. I think screen printing is in a and maybe not maybe and definitely vehicle wraps. So do we want to move in that direction, or are we holding off here, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we should continue to move on to the next products once we feel we have a good, stable base and have had an opportunity to look at, do our own independent studying and reviewing.
Okay.
So I'm all in favor of keeping moving forward. Dagmar, Travis, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm picking up on pretty much. I mean, as we go along, there's going to be things we don't know, but yeah, let's definitely continue on.
Yeah. I think once we get through dimensional and vehicle graphs and period, do you think screen printing is something that would be in this group then?
It's a little bit. It kind of is in there in between, kind of like yes, but in another way, no. But it's not that it's much harder, because it really isn't. And I think Dagmar, with her layout experience, will probably pick up on it easier than I initially did. But a lot of it is just because of conceptually, we're talking about material that is laid out at one point for how many print sheets can we get out of a substrate, and then how many images can we get on the print sheet. So it had me in loops for quite a while, but it's not really that it's much harder.
No, I think that would be great.
I think
continue moving forward in that direction.
Yeah, and I think saving it for last makes sense.
Now, I don't know about everybody else, but I really, really learned a lot doing the quiz and looking at those examples. I truly got a lot out of that. I get a lot out of the session, but just digging in with, like, an example that it would be a typical question that a client would give helped me enormously.
I think because on the pricing forms, they're really, if you want to think of it, dimensional signs, and even cut vinyl, but dimensional even more so, is kind of like an abbreviated digital process. It's the cutting without the printing. So there's very little really to teach here. But I think in terms of the next sort of things that we'll talk about and